Rising upriver, against the current, a strange phenomenon appears at the end of summer in the Dordogne region of France. Our story begins here, far from the sea, with this very special event that only exists thanks to the moon. The tidal bore. It's 9 o'clock in the morning in Saint-Pardon. A crowd gathers along the railings, not really knowing what to expect.
It's coming from over there, you see? That's why we're here. The phenomenon will accelerate in an extraordinary way, and everyone will try their luck.
Among those who go into the water are Roger and Henri, old friends who were kind enough to take us on their kayak. But we don't feel very reassured.
Don't stray too far because the first wave wasn't that big at all. Remember what happened to us last time.
If it hits us now, we're not in a good position at all.
Lean toward me when it gets to us. Prepare to lean forward. Forward and towards me. Here we go.
Even in pairs, with the boat weighed down by a passenger, Roger manages to catch the first wave. Henri is attacked by a surfer, but manages to take the second one. We have a date with the tidal bore. Go, Roger. Go, Henri.
Hey, surfer on the left! Watch out! You on the left! Go for it, Joel! Fight for it!
And then, like a suspended moment, a shared miracle. The tidal bore is a wave caused by the meeting of the river's current and the rising tide. What scientists call a transitional hydraulic jump. On the banks of the Dordogne, it is endearingly called a moon wave.
Don't get too close! Not too tight, guys! You good?
"10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, sometimes more. It's no longer surfing, it's a journey, a pilgrimage. And when the tidal bore passes in front of the village, spectators who have come from afar bear witness to a primitive phenomenon that has existed as long as the moon has existed. But sometimes, it can go very wrong.
Lean over, careful! Stay like that! Stay like that! Stay like that!
Wipe out. Roger and I stay underwater for a few moments. We touch a few stones. Nothing serious. Next time, we'll wear a helmet. Thanks anyway, friends. The tidal bore continues on its way and will return in 12 hours, following a lunar half-cycle. The men who wrote it will live with their memories while awaiting the next one. We now have another appointment 3 hours later, off the coast of Mexico. Isla Mujeres, the Island of Women, is a small fishing island at the end of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is also a mecca for divers, because in these offshore waters, another amazing marine phenomenon appears, closely linked to the brightest phases of the moon.
The swordfish are over there.
The frigates are grouped together and descending. That could be it, but it's moving fast. But ahead of us, they're all grouped together well. It's a compact group, close to the water. So with a bit of luck, it may be sardines.
Frigates and dolphins, so maybe there is sardines. Do you see? Sailfish, it's right there. The sardine bowl split in two. One of them is sport fishers, one is with us over here, and there's sailfish down there. So there goes the Joel to check it out. I want to get ready.
Having come especially for the occasion, Salome Stevenin and Tristan Manon Leclerc, experienced and passionate divers, have called on Miguel Gonzalo, a Mexican biologist.
The swordfish are right there.
The captain, a former swordfish fisherman, communicates with other fishermen to locate the schools after 3 hours of navigation. Bingo.
Look, it's a big black ball that we see on the surface.
Everyone gets in the water without really knowing what to expect. The captain was right. A sumptuous animal ballet, a gigantic feeding orgy disguised as choreography, unfolds before our eyes.
The sailfish are visual hunters. They find their food by their eyesight. So when the full moon is set and their period, it not only makes a plankton migration, zooplankton migration from the depths up to the surface.
I knew that during full moons, swordfish came up to eat sardines, which eat plankton. So I knew there were swordfish during full moons, but I had never dived with them. I realize how lucky I am to be able to witness this meeting between the moon and these animals. For me, it illustrates the perfect harmony of nature. I don't know if it's a meeting, but it's a perfect balance. The moon attracts plankton, the plankton attracts sardines, the sardines attract swordfish. It's there. Without paying any attention to the divers, the swordfish will devour the sardines down to the very last one.
Whoa. 30 swordfish. A big group, a lot of action. They nabbed 10 of them while they were with them, and some were this far over our heads.
Oh, it's so pretty. I wanted to go into the ball with them.
I thought he'd come back up, but I preferred to stay down there. Stay there with the ball. But they're a lot faster than us.
But what do the tidal boar in Dordogne and the swordfish feast in Mexico have in common? Apart from the fact that almost 240,000 miles from us, a very special star exerts an influence on our planet, whose full effects have not yet been measured. How? How is the moon, so familiar to us, able to create so much poetry, so much beauty? What is its real influence on the oceans, and how does it work? How does it cause phenomena of disproportionate magnitude and sometimes disasters all across the Earth?
It's like a monster. It's the moon that sends it to us.
It's not new. 4 billion years ago, it was already exerting a force on the molten Earth that raised waves of over 1,600 feet high.
When the moon started forming, you had tides that were 4,000 times stronger than they are today.
The moon is not only the origin of the ocean tides. from the height of a 5-story building in the bay of Mont St Michel. In the 4 corners of the planet, it organizes life and serves as the fundamental biological clock for thousands of marine species.
This is the culmination of a year of research waiting for corals to spawn and reproduce.
I'm getting ready here in the shady corners of it.
From time immemorial, men have lent her supernatural powers. The Mayas practiced sacrifices on the occasion of certain phases of the moon. Depending on whether it was rising or falling, it would reveal our deep and morbid impulses, make our hair grow, prevent us from sleeping, and increase the number of petty crimes. It was off the mark. Beyond all beliefs, these effects are even more powerful than anything one can imagine. Even if, one day in 1969, she peacefully agreed to be visited.
1-0. Still on its way to orbit after a successful NASA hookup through.
Whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, each and every one of us was born from a very distant day of a meeting with the moon.
I can show you what I found last night while looking for an answer to your question, how do tides work? I found an animation.
Alessandro Morbidelli is in charge of the astronomy laboratory of the Nice Côte d'Azur Observatory. It was he and his team who, in 2010, precisely dated, modeled, and explained the appearance of the moon in the vicinity of the Earth, 4,450 billion years ago. Alessandro Morbidelli is a world leader who only needs a computer, a blackboard, and a bicycle to be able to work. His office overlooks the Baie des Anges and the city of Nice. An asteroid even bears his name.
I'm going to show you an animation of the collision that gave rise to the moon, made by Professor Bentz from the University of Bern. So here we see the Earth in yellow, and we see the impactor in red, the Martian mass impactor hitting the Earth. You see there is a lot of material that is ejected and that will go into orbit around the Earth. Notice the time scale. Everything happens in a few hours. So it's really fast, even on a human scale. Obviously, the humans didn't exist. So here you see a bunch of particles flying around the Earth. The red particles are particles that come from the impactor, and the yellow particles are particles that come from the Earth. You see, the collision is occurring in several events because part of the impactor remains in space and re-impacts the Earth 2-3 times, and each time there is more material which is ejected into this disk of debris around the planet.
By sheer luck, the impact is tangential, slightly to the side. Precision is fundamental, because the Earth absorbs the shock but does not explode. The impactor is completely destroyed. Its mass is absorbed by that of the Earth. Debris from the collision of the 2 planets is projected thousands of miles away to form a ring of meteorite and molten material that will quickly aggregate.
The collision itself takes about 20 or 30 hours, and the moon formation process starts right after with a lunar core, a lunar embryo that forms during the first month but continues to grow during the first millennium. So there is a proto-moon that forms very quickly in about a month from the material that is already far enough away. But after that, the moon continues to grow by collecting all the material that migrates farther from the Earth. As soon as the moon begins to form, the tide as we know it develops. So when the moon started forming, you had tides that were 4,000 times stronger than they are today.
Tides 4,000 times greater than today's, on an Earth which was then only a ball of molten lava. Because of this collision, the Earth is still completely molten, liquid, and the Moon, which is then only some 12,400 miles away, causes waves and a tide more than 1,600 feet high, which agitate an infinite magmatic ocean. Plastic, fluid, the Earth literally deforms with the passage of each tide, which passes at full speed every 3 hours. Projecting a tidal wave of 4.5 billion years ago onto a landscape today would result in folding effects as high as mountains.
So the Earth was pretty much just fluid. The Moon, obviously being much closer to us, is huge in the sky. So you can imagine floating on this lava and seeing this gigantic moon that takes up the entire sky, passing over you every 6 hours, because the rotation period of the Earth is of the order of 6 hours.
The Earth is still spinning at full speed. The Moon crosses the sky every 6 hours, occupying most of the space. A year has more than 1,400 days. Oceans and continents are not yet formed. We will come back to that. It is the saga of the Earth and the Moon, the two sister planets of mixed blood. On the other side of the Earth, a signal from the sky is impatiently awaited. Life depends on it. In the north of Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, extends over nearly 1,900 miles. With several thousand species of sponges, corals, mollusks, or marine animals, some of which have yet to be studied. As the November full moon approaches, everyone awaits an event that will have fundamental repercussions on the entire reef. We arrived just before. A team of biologists, led by Anthony Bertucci, a French coral scientist, settled on an island in the Great Barrier Reef to study the reproductive cycles of certain species and the influence of the moon on spawning. For him and his colleagues, there is only one place and one time in the year to study this very mysterious phenomenon.
Oh, you mean this one?
On the list.
This fragment we just cut, we can see the eggs inside the polyps a little better. Are they mature enough to be laid? We'll know in the next few nights.
In each aquarium and each tank, Anthony and Wiebke, his assistant, have isolated a single species of coral in order to time the expected spawning to the nearest minute.
Here we see the cells, occupied by the polyps, that form the coral colony. Inside this cell, we see here 2 packets of eggs ready to be expelled at the time of spawning. We're expecting the bulk of the acroporous spawn to happen tomorrow.
The next night, in a laboratory lit by red light that doesn't disturb the corals, Anthony's team doesn't sleep a wink.
Tell me, what kind of test are you performing?
We collect as many eggs as possible from the tanks that contain the colonies that turned out to be female. We're going to put them together and use them to fertilize with the sperm we collected previously.
Leaning as if around a cradle, the scientists suck up each egg laid using a pipette. Never before have we been able to observe the reproduction of coral in the laboratory.
For this species, this is the first time that we've had so many eggs at the station. We have lots of eggs. It's the culmination of a year of research, waiting for the coral to spawn and reproduce.
It only happens one night?
It only happens on one night, one or two, depending on the species. So you have to be there at the right time.
You must be present at the right time because the moon does not wait. A few miles offshore and at the same time is another way to wait for spawning. Leaving the coast the same evening, boats full of tourists from all over the world are also on hand for an exceptional dive on the Great Barrier Reef in the middle of the night. Spawning night diving has become a very lucrative business. Several agencies charter boats and have secured dive areas, although biologists believe the coral should be disturbed as little as possible. It's as if a tourist bus landed in a delivery room at the time of the first contractions. At the bottom of the water, as if for a vigil over weapons hidden in the dark, no one sleeps. Everyone waits. And within a few minutes, like every year for 400 million years, the date of the appearance of coral on Earth, the moon gives the signal, and the miracle happens again. Millions of billions of coral eggs are then released, stimulating in a common impulse the emission of sperm from male corals so that fertilization takes place in open water. The corals live far from each other, but have found a way, with the moon as witness, to reproduce anyway. After fertilization in open water, the larvae will then swim for a few days, then settle a little further away, and thus continue their mission of colonization that instinct has assigned to them since their origins. The most incredible is yet to come. In the lab, scientists make a shocking discovery.
So Minipora, where is it there? So night 4 here, 1 hour after sunset. Okay, so then we are 10 weeks in the tank as well, night 4 and 5, and the same 1 hour after sunset. So fungi fungites. Night 5, right before sunset, so 5 minutes before sunset.
Before our eyes, scientists are unveiling a primitive agenda that was put in place little by little over millions of years. Thus, each species of coral follows a spawning schedule, down to the minute, using the phases of the moon like a clock. Each species must reproduce, but not mix with the others. No one has yet deciphered it.
In this table, we have the names of the species, classified by family, the type of reproduction, hermaphrodite or separate sexes. Then we have the day after the full moon when spawning is expected. Then we have the number of hours after sunset. Everything happens between the third and seventh night after the full moon, meaning we have a large tidal amplitude at the full moon, and this amplitude will decrease. That's why the corals will spawn between this third and seventh night, to favor the survival and dispersion of the larvae. But the bulk of the laying is essentially done on one night and at a specific time.
Scientists have just discovered that coral has molecules sensitive to light, especially night light, moonlight, and is able to measure time to the minute based on the intensity of this light. Like this, the coral can see. Certain fish, certain mammals, men, are also endowed with these sensitive molecules called cristochromes, which are like primitive eyes, eyes before eyes. This tends to prove that we, the human species, are very distant descendants of coral, very distant cousins who appeared long after them on Earth. Much further out, off the Australian coast, we hope to catch another absolutely unique animal behavior, which also only occurs once a year. Christmas Island, almost 1,000 miles northwest of Australia, has the distinction of hosting the largest colony of red crabs on Earth, which by the time we arrive, have begun a great journey. And this happens every year at the end of November. The island's crabs, sedentary, solitary, and terrestrial, emerge from their burrows and all head out to sea, as if called by a massive signal. In the forest, on the roads, or on the beach, Ranger Robert McMulloy accompanies them. The red crab is a protected species.
Do you have the sound on? Yes. I hope you don't hear the crunch of a crab. A little bit weaving all over the place.
In town, schools, businesses, gas stations, and golf courses are overrun with millions of red crabs, as not all roads can be cut off. They were there long before man arrived. The females carrying their eggs must reach the shore at all costs.
So this is the female. You can see the eggs being held underneath there, and she positions herself at the edge of the water, and when she's ready she just releases them. They don't get washed off, she actually lets them go. So she's hanging on to them using these little things, and she's able to keep hanging on to them until she's ready. And you can see she's all dirty because she's just come out of the mating burrow.
Coming from all over the island, some crabs have traveled more than 6 miles. Those who live far away left 3 weeks ago. Those who live nearby left the day before. They must arrive at the same time. How do they know how long it will take? How do they know 3 weeks before they're going to have a date that they can't miss? The moon, once again.
Sun getting ready here in the shady corners of it.
On the scale of the whole island, 50 million crabs, wherever they may be, have integrated the same countdown, anticipating and adapting their journey time to arrive simultaneously at the edge of the water. Gathered now in clusters of thousands of individuals, the females await the quarter moon, which will determine the right moment to lay eggs. Tension mounts on the port of Christmas Island. It's the last night. By dint of speaking of a miracle, the word becomes overused. But how else to explain it? Like a renewed prodigy, as with other phenomena elsewhere on the planet, and sometimes at the same time, the females in a final burst approach the water to respond to the injunction to reproduce. For only a few hours, millions of female crabs take advantage of the low tides to free themselves without being carried away by the waves, a majestic organization that has been in place since the dawn of time. It's 3 a.m. The ranger is on the beach.
The red crabs go down, you can see them lift their arms up and expose the underneath and release the eggs. Usually a little bit of a shake at the same time, but really they just let their claspers go and the eggs are on their way. The vast majority tend to sort of do it on the one night.
Beneath the crab's shells, a compass, a clock, a lunar calendar, and a sea instinct all combine to make life give life. Arriving on the island by sea millions of years ago, these crabs no longer know how to swim, but know when to entrust their offspring to the ocean. The first crescent moon means low tide. Any mother crab knows that.
They've obviously been here a long time and evolved for this place. But as much as they like living in the forest, and that's good for them all year, it's when they have to get down to the sea to reproduce. Put the eggs back in the salt water, and they have that little stage where they do swim when the eggs have just hatched out. And then a few weeks later, when the little ones come back, then that's it. There's no more going back to the sea other than just to get to the edge.
In the early morning, the liberated mothers hit the road again, 6 miles in the opposite direction of cliffs, braving walls to climb, dangerous parking lots or forests, from which they will not move for a year. The moon in its orbit continues on its way towards other effects, other influences.
Watch out, it's coming. Get to the side, it's dangerous. You've never seen anything like this.
Move away, move out of the way.
You should be careful and get out of the way. It goes much faster than you can imagine.
The tidal bore also continues its journey. It is found in the east of India, in another estuary, Calcutta, where the inhabitants call it the Baan. In the meantime, it has grown in size.
Don't challenge the Baan. It's like a monster. It's better to hide. Don't laugh. You'll see. It's huge. We clearly see that it's in relation to the moon. When it is round and full in the sky, then the Baan passes. Then it calms down as the moon wanes. It's the moon. She sends it to us.
In India, as elsewhere, what cannot be explained always comes from heaven. But this is not completely false. The Baan is a divine manifestation that can destroy everything in its path. After the wave, the poor of the city searched the sediments, looking for a coin, a gold tooth, a small jewel. If heaven works miracles, it may well grant some tiny mana.
So you have found this, and what is this?
Designed by the architect Garnier, built by Eiffel in the 18th century, and listed as a historical monument, the large dome of the Nice Côte d'Azur Observatory was, for its time, an architectural and technological marvel. Weighing nearly 1,100 tons and relying on a hydraulic system, it was moved using cranks. At the time, the 60-foot telescope was the largest in the world. It was used to discover hundreds of planets and proved, among other things, that there was no life on the moon. The old telescope is still used for occasional missions. It belongs to the French National Center for Scientific Research. There we find astronomer Alessandro Morbidelli, whom we left 4.5 billion years ago, just after the collision.
Because of this collision, the Earth was very hot. It was in a state of fusion and covered by what is called a magmatic ocean. You have to imagine that the entire surface of the Earth was covered with lava and was therefore fluid, a magmatic ocean.
An ocean of magma agitated by explosions, lava geysers, and bombarded by meteorites, which as it cools begins to crystallize and form a crust, ever deformed by the tide. In a few million years, the temperature drops. The Earth is released in the form of gas from the water it contained. It is then surrounded by a thick layer of clouds. The atmosphere is saturated with steam.
After the temperature dropped, the vapors condensed, and torrential rains caused water to form the oceans and seas as we know them today. As soon as there was liquid water over the Earth's crust, the water tides began. Obviously, the average depth of the oceans was less than it is today, and so the Earth was completely covered with water back then.
4 billion years ago, the Earth was thus completely covered with water, a blue planet floating in space whose liquid surface is stirred by currents and tides that turn on an infinite, unobstructed ocean. The power of storms defies imagination. Colossal swells, daunting hurricanes, and waves of still boiling water constitute a permanent liquid chaos. The moon occupies almost the entire sky. A few million more years, and land begins to emerge through the play of tectonic plates, volcanic eruptions, and different rock densities. The moon recedes, islands appear. fault lines grow. The water that once covered the entire planet is grouped together in what will become oceans. A first continent appears, which will then separate into several others. The moon's orbit stabilizes. The rhythm of the tides synchronizes. The water on our planet, today's water, the water we drink, has stood the test of time. The Bay of Mont St Michel is one of the places in the world where the tides are the most spectacular. 46 to 50-foot differences in height with the greatest coefficients. It is the most well-known terrestrial phenomenon caused by the moon, which affects most of the oceans. The sea rises, the sea falls, an obvious phenomena for all the inhabitants of the coast, but which terrified the Romans when they arrived on the shores of the Atlantic. In the Bay of Mont St Michel, the phenomenon is amplified by the topography. Shallow depths allow the liquid mass to completely withdraw. A spectacular visual effect that leaves the mount completely dry. A few miles to the north is the Chausey archipelago, a little unspoiled paradise whose navigation among the rocks is the business of experienced boaters or professionals like Baan. Baan has maintained the family concessions on the archipelago because the shellfish here are of an inimitable quality. You have to move fast. The producers of Chausey are moon workers in a way.
We're organized around the tides. We can't miss them because we're working with the water level. The faster it drops, the faster we have to react. It has to be set, and if not, if we miss it, then we have to transport everything by hand.
Mid-June is the time to harvest the mussels, which have grown for almost a year on bouchot beds, a production technique on wooden stakes that has remained almost unchanged since the 13th century. Today, the harvest is mechanized. Like the swordfish in Mexico or the coral in Australia, the Chausey mussels have adapted during their evolution to the rhythm of the tide and the moon.
You can see the mussels are open. They're filtering and feeding. They're forced to open to filter when there's water, and then to close when there isn't water, and to wait for the sea to rise again. With that phenomena, they build their muscle that makes them more meaty. It's the tidal phenomena that makes the shellfish meaty. It makes their flesh so delicious.
We hadn't thought of that. It's so simple. The shellfish that we buy, the oysters, the mussels, can stay out of the water for several hours, of course. We must go back to see Alessandro Morbidelli, says the scientist, so that he can answer a few final questions.
We see at least three major beneficial effects of the tides on Earth. First, the tide is stirring the oceans and creating great ocean currents. These ocean currents move water from one place to another, to warmer or colder places and vice versa. So it creates currents that mix the water at different temperatures, and this has a stabilizing effect on the climate. Then today, the tide which goes up on the continents and then withdraws is the first cause of erosion. It's very important because the eroded continents release nutrients and fertilize the superficial layer of the oceans. Third, the tide is thought to have played a role in pulling life out of the water. Life began in the water. Then at a certain time that is not very clearly established, around 500 million years ago, there was a kind of explosion of life. For some authors, 1 billion years ago, life emerged from the oceans.
According to the latest scientific advances, life is thought to have appeared in the oceans around 3.5 billion years ago, first in the form of chemical strains, then of single-celled organisms, which then evolved, especially in shallow waters. 400 to 500 million years ago, certain marine animals took advantage of tidal movements to learn to live out of the water for a few minutes, then a few hours. Their breathing stops. Their metabolism stops, then starts again as soon as the water returns. A few million more years, and certain species will reach the Earth and never come back. It is the onslaught of life that would never have come out of the water without the help of the tides. In Chausey, what was just a small group of rocks lost on the surface of the sea has become in 6 hours a continent of sand and rocks. But how to explain how to visualize a tide? How to measure its impact on the landscape? The only way is to stop in one place for a long time and wait. Wait and see. Finally see the tide and understand what the moon is capable of. Make the ocean rise, move billions of cubic feet of water, make an archipelago disappear and reappear 6 hours later. Have fun with the landscapes as if they were living paintings. We understand through this effect how the tides are the primary cause of soil erosion, how shellfish and all species subject to the phenomenon of the tides have learned to live for a few hours outside the water, knowing that it will come back, and how a seaside landscape breathes. Having left Francis Dordogne 12 hours ago, passing through India, Brazil, China, the tidal bore returns. Faithful, punctual. It has traveled the world.
Here we go!
Roger and Henri are there, waiting for it. Faithful to the appointment too. They knew that the wave would return, as they knew that the moon would return. Christmas Island, 3 weeks after spawning, the small crabs released into the sea found their way home on their own. A tiny miracle on the scale of the cosmos, but a sublime conjunction in the history of the stars. The moon allowed the Earth to stabilize on its axis, to regulate climate, and then to favor the appearance of life. It would even have prevented the Earth from cooling too quickly by continuing to knead it like a ball of modeling clay, but it is slowly moving away at the speed of 13 feet per century. At this rate, the sun will go out before the moon leaves us. Don't worry, we have some margin. We're right there, at the point of equilibrium, suspended in infinity between an accident of planets and the inescapable disappearance of the system. It was a beautiful encounter.